Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
They showed up the morning after Arthur's funeral, dressed like it was Easter Sunday, and not the day after I buried the only real father I ever had. My name's Rick. I'm 42, and as of last month, I became the sole owner of a $10 million hardware business and a 19-room mansion in Vermont. My Uncle Arthur left me everything because he raised me after my parents dumped me at 14 and disappeared without warning. And now there they were, standing in my marble-tiled foyer like they belonged there. My mother even smiled. "We're still your legal guardians, you know," she said, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve like I was still some teenager who needed permission to use the phone. I didn't say a word. I just stared. My jaw clenched so tight I thought I might break a tooth. Dad gave me this weak little grin, like we were about to have a barbecue together. "Rick, son, we know this is a tough time, but we're here now. You don't have to do this alone." I almost laughed in their faces, except it wasn't funny. Quick note: before listening, share in the comments which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. "You think I've been alone?" I finally said. "Arthur didn't just leave me the house and the company. He left me every single thing because I earned it." Then, like divine timing, Harold walked in, Arthur's lawyer. Sharp suit, polished shoes, briefcase in hand. When my parents saw him, their smiles dropped like bricks. "Oh," Harold said, adjusting his glasses. "You're the Walkers. Surprised to see you here?" "But not that surprised." "What's that supposed to mean?" Dad asked, voice tightening. "It means Arthur anticipated this exact move," Harold replied. "We'll be happy to reconvene when the proper documents are in place. Until then, this meeting is over." He turned to me. "Rick, I need a moment of your time in the office." I nodded. My hands were still shaking, but I followed Harold down the hall, leaving my parents frozen in place, mouths half open. Arthur had planned for this. Of course he had. The last thing I saw before I turned the corner was Mom grabbing Dad's arm like she couldn't stand up straight. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. They'd shown up acting like they still had a place in my life. But this wasn't their home, and I sure as hell wasn't their kid anymore. Community question. What would you have done if the parents who abandoned you tried to come back for your inheritance? Drop your answer in the comments. I didn't always live in a mansion. Didn't grow up around polished wood floors and imported rugs. I grew up in a one-bedroom rental with peeling paint and a busted screen door in Binghamton, New York. Back then, we were just normal. My dad worked long shifts at a print shop. Mom cut hair out of our kitchen for neighbors and her friends. We had spaghetti every Tuesday, watched wrestling on a tiny box TV while sitting in folding chairs, and I thought that was enough. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then Dad got hooked on poker. It started small, he and his buddies sitting around a card table in our living room, laughing and betting $5 bills. But it grew fast. The card games turned into overnight bus trips to the casinos upstate. He'd come back smelling like cigarettes and cheap cologne, win or lose, promising things were about to turn around. They didn't. Mom tried to act like things were fine. She'd still perm hair in the kitchen while pretending not to look at the mailbox pile growing by the door. But after a while, she stopped answering the door at all. Then she stopped opening the blinds. And one day, she just didn't get out of bed. I remember opening the fridge once and seeing a bottle of mustard and a half-empty milk jug. That was dinner. I didn't even tell anyone. I didn't know how. No. Then one morning in October, I woke up late for school. The alarm didn't go off. House was too quiet. No coffee smell. No arguing. Just silence. I walked out of my bedroom and noticed Dad's coat wasn't on the hook. The closet was wide open, empty hangers swinging. My chest started buzzing like a broken wire. I stepped into their room. Drawers open. Half the bed stripped. Bathroom cabinet gutted. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the place. I made it to the kitchen, hoping maybe they were just outside or in the backyard. Instead, there was a note sitting on the table. right next to a soggy cereal bowl I'd forgotten to rinse the night before. "Rick, we can't do this anymore. Uncle Arthur will take care of you." "Mom." That was it. No explanation, no instructions, no goodbye. Just my name and their plan to dump me on a man I barely remembered meeting twice. I stood there for a long time, staring at that note, waiting for it to make sense. Then I opened the front door and looked down the street. No car, no sound, just gray clouds rolling over the rooftops and wet leaves plastered to the sidewalk. I didn't cry. I just sat on the front step and waited. For what? I wasn't even sure. Someone to realize what happened? A teacher to call? A neighbor to notice? No one did. By lunchtime, I was still sitting outside with my backpack beside me. At some point, I went back in, poured myself some dry cornflakes, and sat on the couch flipping channels. I guess I was in shock, or just stupidly hopeful they'd walk back in. They didn't. That night, I dragged a blanket onto the couch and left the hall light on. I couldn't sleep. Every time a car drove by, I jumped. Every floorboard creak made me sit up. But morning came, and I was still alone. The next couple days were a blur. I skipped school, ate cereal and crackers until they ran out. The landlord showed up yelling about late rent. I lied and said my parents were out of town. He didn't buy it. Said he'd be calling child services. It was the school counselor who finally stepped in. She called the number Mom left on the note. Arthur's number. A few days later, a dark blue Lexus pulled up in front of our crappy rental. And that's when everything started to change. Question for you, my friends. If your parents left you with nothing but a note, would you ever forgive them? Tell us in the comments. We're listening. He didn't even get out of the car right away. Just sat there, engine running, watching the house like he was sizing up a crime scene. When he finally stepped out, he was wearing a gray suit and black coat. Not a wrinkle on either. The man looked like money. Smelled like it too. Something crisp and sharp, like aftershave and fresh paper. I remember thinking, no way in hell this guy is related to my dad. "You're Rick," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm Arthur. Pack what you need. The rest will follow." That was it. No handshake, no hug. No. No? How are you holding up, kid? Just orders? Calm and flat like he was confirming a hotel reservation. I grabbed a duffel bag, shoved in some clothes, a photo of me and my mom from a school trip, and my Walkman. I left the cereal box on the table, half full. Felt wrong to finish it. The ride was quiet. He didn't ask about my parents, and I didn't bring them up. I stared out the window as we left the cracked sidewalks and empty storefronts of Binghamton behind. He drove smooth, like the wheel was an extension of his arm. No radio, no small talk, just the hum of the road. 3 hours later, we pulled into a circular driveway bigger than the street I grew up on. The house looked like a damn hotel. Stone walls, tall columns, a front door that probably weighed more than my bed. I didn't know whether to take off my shoes or run. A woman met us at the door. Older, stiff posture, called him Mr. Walker. He said, "This is Rick. He'll be staying in the East Wing." Then walked off like it was no big deal. The East Wing. My new bedroom had its own bathroom, a queen bed with a headboard, and windows that looked out over a private pond. There was a desk with actual drawers and a reading lamp. I sat on the bed and didn't move for 10 minutes. It was like waking up inside a catalog. That night, I ate dinner at a long table set for 12. It was just the two of us. Roasted chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, all made by a cook I never saw. I said thanks, and he nodded once. After dinner, he handed me a sheet of paper. "This is your schedule. Breakfast at 7. Reading hour from 8 to 9. No food in your room. Lights out by 10. "You serious?" I asked. He gave me a look. Not mean, just firm. "You need structure. You've had enough chaos." I wanted to tell him to shove the structure, but I didn't. Instead, I went upstairs and closed my door harder than I needed to. Next few weeks I tested him. Didn't follow the reading schedule, skipped lights out, snuck snacks into my room. He never yelled, never raised a hand, just adjusted things. Switched my room to a smaller one with no TV. Added chores to the schedule. I swore he was trying to break me, so I kept pushing. I told the maid I hated the food, slammed the bathroom door so hard it cracked, ditched tutoring twice, just waited for him to get sick of me and send me off to some group home. But he never flinched. One night, after I threw a fit about piano lessons, he came home with a guitar, said, "Try this instead. Maybe you'll like it more." I didn't even know he knew I skipped piano class. When I bombed algebra that semester, he didn't ground me. He hired a private tutor and moved my desk to the study so I'd focus. He wasn't affectionate. Not once did he say, "I'm proud of you," or "You're doing okay." But one day, I left my science fair project on the kitchen counter. Half finished, kind of a mess. When I came home, it was sitting on the dining table, fully glued, repainted, and fixed. No note, no credit, just done. That was his way. He didn't do emotion, he did action, quiet, stubborn, constant action. And slowly, I started adjusting. Woke up on time, started reading, cleaned up without being told. Not because I was scared, but because he showed up every day, no matter what. And I hadn't had that in a long time. One night, I asked why he even took me in. He said, "Because no one else would, and you don't throw family away." I wanted to ask him why my parents did, but I couldn't get the words out, so I just nodded. Quick question for you guys. Would you have trusted Arthur, or would you have fought back harder? Drop your thoughts in the comments. By the time I'd lived with Arthur for a year, I knew 3 things. He hated laziness, respected preparation, and trusted no one who smiled too much. He built his whole empire from a single truck. His father left it to him when he died, just an old work truck and a few loyal customers. Arthur turned that into the first Walker's Hardware in Rutland, Vermont. Then another. Then another. By the time I came along, he had 20 stores, a warehouse, a fleet of trucks, and a staff of over 100. He never bragged about it, just called it the business. He started bringing me along to store visits, meetings with suppliers, end-of-quarter check-ins. I was still just a kid, but he made me sit in the back of boardrooms with a legal pad and take notes. Afterward, he'd quiz me in the car. What did you see? Who lied? Who looked nervous? It was like business was a sport and he was coaching me from the sidelines. He enrolled me in a private school when I turned 15, some fancy prep academy with Latin classes and cafeteria trays that had grilled salmon on Fridays. The first day, I wore the wrong color shoes and got told off by a sophomore. I ate lunch alone for a month. At home, I told Arthur I hated it. I begged to transfer back to public school. I didn't fit in, didn't talk like them, didn't even know what half the words in my classes meant. He said, "I don't raise quitters. You'll stay." "That's easy for you to say," I shot back. "You're not the one getting laughed at." He didn't flinch. "You don't have to be like them. You just have to beat them." I slammed the door to my room that night. But I stayed, and eventually, I caught up. He hired a tutor for Latin, made me rewrite essays until they bled red ink, and bought me noise-canceling headphones so I could study in silence. We argued sometimes, especially about college. I told him I wanted to study music production. I loved recording, mixing sounds. The guitar he bought me had become my one escape. He shook his head. "Not yet. You can afford to chase dreams after you build something. Not before." "That's not your decision," I said. He gave me that look, the one where his jaw tightened and his eyes didn't blink. "I didn't spend 10 years turning you into a man just so you could throw it all away chasing a hobby." "Hobby?" I said, voice rising. "You think music's a hobby?" "I think food on the table isn't free," he snapped. "You want to be poor and inspired or stable and respected?" That was our worst fight. I didn't speak to him for 3 days, but when my college applications went out, every one of them said business as the intended major. I didn't do it because he scared me. I did it because deep down, I knew he was right. He'd built something solid, and he was handing me the tools to do the same. I just hated that I couldn't admit it at the time. When I turned 17, Harold, his lawyer, came by the house with a thick folder, sat me down at the kitchen table. Arthur stood in the corner, arms crossed. "Just need your signature here," Harold said, tapping the last page. "What is it?" I asked. "Adoption papers," Arthur said. My heart stopped. "Wait, really?" "It's done already," he said. "You just need to sign for the records. I didn't change your name." "Why not?" He looked at me steady. "In case your parents ever returned. I wanted there to be no confusion about what they gave up." I didn't know what to say. So I signed. He didn't hug me, didn't smile. Just gave a small nod and walked out of the room. But that told me more than any hug ever could. Time for your opinion. What matters more, the name you're born with, or the one someone earns? Let us know what you think in the comments. The house was quiet after Harold left with the signed papers. Arthur didn't come back into the room. He didn't need to. The adoption was done, and that was his version of closure. That was the last real conversation we had. He got diagnosed with cancer the following spring. Didn't tell me for the first 2 weeks. Just started scheduling more doctor visits and canceling out-of-state meetings. When I finally confronted him, he pulled up a spreadsheet. "I've got 6 months on average. I'm aiming for 12. And damn if he didn't push himself like he was training for war. Chemotherapy schedules mapped against fiscal reports. Pain medication timed around board calls. Even when the hair started falling out and he couldn't keep food down, he still made it to every quarterly review. The man treated dying like a business problem. When he passed, I handled the funeral the way he would have wanted. Simple, clean, no long speeches. Just a folded flag, one jazz song he liked, and a catered lunch with decent bourbon. The next morning, Harold sent me the estate letter. 10 million in shares. The entire company, the house, the assets, every last thing. It didn't feel real. I put on the only tailored suit I owned and showed up early for the will reading. Sat at the long mahogany table in the main office downtown, heart racing, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I thought maybe some board members would show. Maybe Harold wanted to walk through the next steps with them in the room. But when the door opened, it wasn't executives. It was them. My parents. I froze. They looked older, smaller. Mom's hair was thin and dyed too dark. Dad had a limp. He wore a wrinkled shirt and still somehow walked in like he owned the place. "Rick," Mom said, smiling like this was a family brunch. "You look good." I didn't say anything. Dad stepped forward. "We've been keeping up from a distance. Knew you'd been taken care of. Arthur did a good job. Like he'd sent me off to boarding school or some summer camp." "Why are you here?" I asked. Mom blinked. "Well, we thought it was time to reconnect, start fresh." Then Dad pulled out the line that made my blood go cold. "We're still your legal guardians, technically, so we figured we'd help you manage the estate." Harold hadn't even taken a seat yet. He just raised an eyebrow and said, "Let's reconvene tomorrow. You can bring whatever documentation you believe proves that, but today's meeting is postponed." Mom looked thrown. "But we drove all the way." "It's not a discussion," Harold said, folding his hands. "Come back tomorrow." With proof they backed off. But before they left, Dad stepped close and slipped a business card into my palm like it was some sacred object. "Call anytime. We just want to rebuild." Then they walked out like they hadn't vanished from my life for nearly 2 decades. I stood there holding the card, cheap print, his name and number, no title, just John Walker. Rebuild, like they'd knocked over a Lego tower, not a whole damn childhood. Harold watched me for a moment, then said, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't, not even close. Imagine yourself in this situation. If your parents came back after abandoning you, would you give them the time of day? I don't know what possessed me to agree to dinner. Curiosity, maybe. Definitely not forgiveness. We met at a mid-range Italian place just off Main Street. Not the kind of place Arthur would have stepped foot in, but decent enough for a fake reunion. They were already seated when I walked in. Mom stood up like we were about to hug. I didn't move. She sat back down. Dad gave me that same tired smile. Glad you came. Means a lot. Let's get this over with, I said, sliding into the booth. The server came over. I ordered a water. They both went for wine. We got through the small talk. Or I should say they did. Stories about health issues, layoffs, a fire that damaged part of their house, a cousin I didn't remember dying last year. I nodded through most of it, barely listening. My eyes were locked on the clock above the bar. Then Mom took a deep breath and folded her hands on the table. Rick, there's no easy way to say this. We're in a tough spot. There it was. She glanced at Dad, who picked it up like they'd rehearsed it. We made some mistakes, son, a lot of them, but we've never stopped thinking about you. Really? I said. 15 years of thinking and not one phone call? He paused, like he didn't expect me to push back so fast. Mom jumped in. We didn't know how to come back. We were ashamed, embarrassed. But now that Arthur's gone, we thought maybe I'm vulnerable, I said. Maybe now's the time to cash in. Her eyes welled up. I didn't flinch. We just need a little help to get back on our feet, Dad said. That's all. How much? He didn't hesitate. 70,000 would cover the mortgage, 30 for some medical stuff, maybe a role at the company down the line. I leaned back and laughed, loud enough to make a few heads turn. You abandoned me with a note and a name, I said. Didn't call, didn't write, didn't check in, except through social services once, just enough to keep your record clean. Their faces shifted. That last part hit. Dad's jaw tightened. You don't know what we were going through. Yeah, I do, I said. You were gambling away the grocery money and hiding from it in a dark bedroom. I was the kid in the middle of it, remember? Mom wiped her cheek with a napkin. We were broken. We didn't know what else to do. You left. That's what you did. She looked up at me, voice cracking. We thought Arthur could give you more than we ever could. And he did. You turned out amazing. Look at you. He raised you well. I stared at her. You don't get credit for that. We sat in silence for a beat. They didn't even pretend to be surprised when I didn't offer help. So that's it? Dad said finally. You're gonna hold a grudge forever? No, I said, pulling out a 50 and dropping it on the table. I'm just done pretending we're family. Then I stood up and walked out without another word. Drop your opinion in the comments. If someone who abandoned you asked for help, would you give it or walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. I didn't go back to the office after dinner. I drove straight to Arthur's house and sat in the driveway for almost an hour, headlights off, engine ticking in the cool night air. My head was buzzing, but underneath that was something colder, something off. They hadn't just shown up. They were too ready, too confident. They came in like they had a plan. Inside, I walked past the foyer and went straight to Arthur's office. The room was dark except for the city lights bleeding through the tall windows. I flicked on the lamp, closed the door, and stood there for a minute. Same heavy desk, same smell, leather, wood polish, and the faintest trace of his cologne. The drawer I'd never touched was on the left side, bottom one. I remembered the label, RW, personal. I'd seen it before, but Arthur always kept it locked. I yanked on the handle. Still locked. After 10 minutes of searching, I found the key taped to the underside of a bookshelf, hidden behind a row of trade journals. Of course he'd hide it. Arthur didn't trust people. He planned for every failure. The lock clicked open, and what I found inside made my stomach turn. Thick manila folders, court documents, legal correspondence, certified mail receipts, a stack of private investigator reports clipped together with my initials on the front, and right on top, copies of the adoption papers, notarized, dated, airtight. I started reading. Turns out my parents didn't just vanish. They'd tried coming back before, 3 times. The first time was only months after they dumped me. They reached out through an old lawyer, saying they wanted to revisit custody. Arthur had shut it down before it got past the first letter. The second time, they wanted money, $50,000, to relinquish rights officially, even though they'd already abandoned me. The third was worse. They tried going around Arthur by pretending they were just concerned family. They visited a school counselor while I was in 10th grade, said they'd been wrongfully cut out, and offered a donation to the school in exchange for access. Arthur found out 2 days later and threatened legal action. But it didn't stop there. One report detailed how they'd approached other families after deaths, claiming to be long-lost relatives, cousins, siblings. It was all targeted, all rehearsed. They were con artists, grifters, the kind who didn't even flinch while destroying lives. I sat back in the chair, files still open, and felt something in my chest harden. They hadn't come back because they missed me. They came back because Arthur was gone, and they thought no one would be watching. The next morning, I walked into the law office carrying that same file, wore a dark suit, no tie, no smile. They were already there. This time, they brought backup. A lawyer in his 60s, gray ponytail, sharp teeth. Looked like he charged by the minute and enjoyed every one of them. "Morning," Dad said, trying that warm tone again. "Thanks for meeting." I didn't answer. Just handed the folder to Harold and took my seat. Harold flipped through the file slowly, calmly. When he looked up, his voice didn't waver. "Well, this saves us time." Their lawyer leaned forward. "I'm going to assume you're referring to some prior communication." Harold cut him off. "I'm referring to blackmail attempts, falsified claims, and court-proven abandonment. Would you like copies?" The lawyer held up a hand. "Let's not get aggressive." Harold smiled. "I'm not being aggressive. I'm being thorough. It's what Arthur taught me." Mom went pale. Dad shifted in his chair, lips pressed tight. Harold laid the papers out one by one. "Here's your client's offer to sign over parental rights in exchange for money. Here's the school report showing unauthorized contact attempts. Here are the private investigator's notes, and here's the notarized adoption order, fully executed and binding." Their lawyer stayed quiet. Too quiet. Harold leaned in. "You came in claiming legal standing. What exactly were you planning to submit as evidence?" "This?" He slid the original abandonment note across the table. "My name, their handwriting, the one they left on our kitchen table 15 years ago." Dad's mouth opened, then closed. Mom was crying again, soft and silent this time. The lawyer turned to them. "You didn't tell me any of this." Dad said nothing. Harold stood up. "Unless you have a legitimate claim to submit, I suggest you leave, before we start talking about fraud charges." Nobody moved. I stood, tucked the folder under my arm, and looked straight at my father. "You tried to sell your son for 50 grand? Now you want a seat at the table?" His eyes dropped to the floor. I turned to Harold. "We done here?" Harold nodded. "We're done." Community question. If you found out your parents tried to sell their rights to you, how would you react? We walked out of that boardroom like we just dropped a bomb. My parents didn't say a word. Their lawyer whispered something to them, but neither of them reacted. They just sat there, blinking. Harold didn't speak until we got to the elevator. He waited until the doors closed, then reached into his briefcase and handed me a sealed envelope. "Arthur wanted you to have this after they showed up," he said. "He wrote it a few years ago. Told me to wait until the day came." I turned the envelope over. My name was written on the front, sharp and slanted in Arthur's exact handwriting. No date, no stamp, just my name. Back at the house, I sat at his old desk. The sun was starting to set behind the trees, casting orange light across the bookshelves. I held the envelope for a long minute. My hands didn't shake, but something in my chest did. When I opened it, there were 2 pages, folded neatly, typed. At the top, for Rick. Only when necessary. I started reading. Rick, if you're reading this, then they finally did what I expected them to do. Come back when they thought the door was unlocked. I've always known they would. People like that don't come back for people. They come back for money. I kept records of everything. The blackmail attempts, the lies, the visits to other families pretending to be someone they weren't. I kept it all because I wanted you to have it when the time came. Not just to fight them, to know them. I didn't want you to spend your life wondering if they had good intentions. They don't. You've been legally adopted for years. They have no standing. The will has a no-challenge clause. If they contest it, the entire estate transfers to the Vermont Children's Resource Fund. That clause is real, binding, and airtight. I made sure. If they try to drag you down, don't get emotional. Just stick to the facts. You've got all the ammo you need. You always did. They will come for the money, not you. Be ready. Arthur. I folded the letter and stared at the edge of the desk. He saw them coming before I did. He called their shot like a guy calling a play before it happens. He didn't just protect me. He armed me. Downstairs, Harold was waiting by the door, sipping a cup of coffee from the kitchen. They still there? I asked. He nodded. Lobby, sitting like they're waiting for a train that already left. Good. I took the elevator down myself, walked out into the lobby, holding the letter in one hand and the file folder in the other. They stood up when they saw me. Mom looked like she was about to speak. Don't, I said. You had your chance in there. Dad frowned. Rick, let's not do this in public. Let's do it right now. I stepped forward. You didn't lose a son. You gave one away. You chose to walk out, and now you want a piece of a life you didn't build. We're trying to make things right, Mom started. I cut her off. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about what's finished. And this is finished. Security was already on their way. Harold must have called them in advance. 2 guys in black suits stepped up to the desk. I turned to the guards. Escort them out. They're not guests. Dad's face twisted. You'll regret this. I looked him dead in the eye. I won't. Mom started crying again, quietly this time. She didn't beg, didn't protest, just let herself be walked out the front door like she finally understood this wasn't going to flip in her favor. I didn't follow. I didn't watch. I walked back to the elevator, holding that letter like it weighed 10 pounds. Arthur was gone, but he'd left me exactly what I needed: truth, protection, and proof that even from the grave, he still had my back. Question for you, my friends. If someone prepared for your worst day years in advance, would that change how you saw them? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear how this story ends. I barely made it through half a glass of scotch before the banging started. Not knocking, banging. Full fist to wood. Over and over. I stood from Arthur's leather chair, walked to the front hall, and checked the security monitor mounted beside the alarm system. There they were, my parents, on the porch, soaked in porch light and desperation. I opened the door but didn't step aside. You need to leave, I said flat. You're not welcome here. The restraining order's already in motion. Dad stepped forward. I stayed planted. You've gone too far, he snapped. You think Arthur was a saint? You don't know half of what he... Don't do that, I said. Don't pretend you showed up for truth. You showed up because you lost. Mom clutched her purse like it was all she had left. We raised you. You wouldn't exist without us. You left a note and vanished. That's not parenting. That's escape. She started crying. Real tears, I think. But they didn't hit me like they used to. I'd seen better actors in a middle school play. Dad's voice rose. He poisoned you against us. He made you think we were monsters. No, I said. He didn't have to. I remembered everything on my own. Mom tried to squeeze past me, hand brushing the doorframe. I stepped in her way. Cross that line and I press charges tonight. She froze. We just want to talk, she said, face to face, like a family. You made sure that wasn't possible the second you put me on Arthur's doorstep and disappeared. Dad's face twisted. You think money makes you better than us? I pointed at the security camera above the door. Every word's recorded. You want to keep digging this hole? Go ahead. He saw it. That flash in his eyes. Recognition. We weren't in their game anymore. We were in mine. You'll regret this, he spat. You'll die alone. You'll choke on that house and that money. And when you do, no one will be there. I stared at him, cold. Arthur raised me. He stayed. You ran. You're not family. Just DNA. Behind me, the hallway light blinked once, the signal from the panic system I'd set up. The cops were on their way. You brought this on yourself, Mom said. Her voice cracked like glass. We never wanted to fight you. You wanted access. That's not the same as love. Blue lights lit up the driveway. 2 cruisers rolled in fast and silent. Officers stepped out, hands low, calm but firm. Evening, one said, stepping up beside me. These the individuals from the report? Yes, I said. They've been warned. This is your second and final visit. The officers flanked them without a fight. Dad tried to say something again, but one of the cops waved him off. This isn't the place, he said. They didn't cuff them, didn't have to. They just walked them down the steps like 2 drunks at closing time. I watched their backs, bent, defeated, still too proud to look over their shoulders. I didn't follow. I didn't say goodbye. I just closed the door. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt the weight lift off my chest like someone had finally cut the rope. Community question. Could you look your own parents in the face and call them strangers? Leave your answer in the comments. 6 months went by fast. I kept the business running exactly how Arthur would have expected. Tight numbers, strong margins. But I added a few touches of my own. New branding, updated website, real outreach. Stuff he used to grumble about when I suggested it, even though he secretly liked watching the results. Now we've got customers from 3 states ordering online. Inventory moves smoother. The trucks don't sit idle. His name's still on every storefront, just cleaner, sharper. But that wasn't enough for me. I launched the Walker Second Chance Foundation 2 months ago, a nonprofit for kids like me, ones who aged out of the system or got dropped by the people who were supposed to love them. Turns out, there's a lot more of us than anyone talks about. I get letters now, emails from kids in group homes, teachers who want to refer someone, volunteers who say, I was that kid once. Every time one comes in, I read it out loud in Arthur's office, just like I used to read in my first report cards. Harold handles the legal stuff. I don't even call him my lawyer anymore. He's family now. One night, after a board meeting, we were having a drink in the study when he said, Arthur was the coldest man I ever met, except when it came to you. I nodded. Yeah, he didn't show it much, but I always felt it. You were the only one who didn't disappoint him, he said. That one stayed with me. The other day I was organizing some old storage boxes in the attic, stuff I hadn't touched since the funeral. One of them had Arthur's handwriting on the side, R.W., keep. Inside was a worn cigar box. Nothing fancy, just rubber bands around the lid, the corners frayed. I opened it. Inside were old report cards, my broken science fair trophy from 9th grade, the ticket stub from the concert I begged him to take me to, and a photo of us fishing, me scrawny with braces, him in sunglasses holding a cooler. Under the photo was a folded piece of paper, one line typed, You were never my project. You were my second chance. I read it twice before closing the box. Then I put it on the top shelf where nothing else would sit above it. My biological parents haven't tried again. The restraining order held. Their silence now? That's probably the most honest thing they've ever given me. Some nights, I still wonder what would have happened if Arthur hadn't shown up that day. If the Lexus never pulled in, If I'd gone into the system, bounced around, turned bitter, cold. But those thoughts pass. Because most days, I'm just focused on one thing. Being the man Arthur expected me to become. Steady, honest, built for the long haul. I don't care what blood says. Family isn't who made you. It's who shows up when you're broken and stays until you're strong again. And Arthur? He was my real dad. No question. Do you believe blood matters more than loyalty? Or is family the ones who show up? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story hit you hard, like and subscribe to support more stories that matter.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.